Here's this map real quick. So the visitor center's here. We've just driven on this road. We're right about here. This was the short farm. If you've read some of the stuff about Wilson's Creek, this is where they first entered what was basically the battlefield. So they're going to be coming from this way as I talk, and the first Confederates are on, if you can see this little spur right here, if you can read a topographic map, just a little over a quarter of a mile that way, which unfortunately we can't see. That's where the first Confederates were. So you guys can all see that spur there, and we're up here where the short farm is.
Well, around the short farm here is also where they ran into the cavalry ran into a small detachment of
foraging party.
Basically a foraging party, but they didn't have pickets sent out for the night, so whoever was out here was either just walking around looking for food or I don't think they had enough foresight to patrol because, I mean, most of them weren't professionals.
Well, like they said in the video, they had pulled in their pickets the night before because they're getting ready to get into march formation and head out. It rains, they're scared their ammunition's going to get wet, and so they don't attack. But yet nobody has the foresight to send that outer security out again in the night. So here, this is a farm, there's food, and there's young soldiers, so what do you think they're doing when they're not well fed? They're up here scrounging around for food. And
what kind of food would that be?
Anything that moved.
Cows, chickens, pigs, goats,
squirrels, rabbits.
Livestock and grain is what they're looking for.
Oh.
Like oats and wheat had already been harvested. Corn was ripening. It was green corn that they ate. They still eat green corn, even though you can't eat a lot of it, or it affects your,
digestion.
So they're out here foraging, and then they see the Federals here marching down, and then they go and report, and that's the first report. So it's not because the Confederates have great security. It's because they've got troops that lack discipline that are wandering around trying to get something to eat.
Wow.
So the Federals come here, and they begin to deploy near this farm. They talked about Plummer's battalion. He's got about 300 raw recruits, regular Army. He's on the left-hand side over there. They've got the 1st Missouri and the 2nd Missouri Infantry, and they deploy in line of battle, and then they begin to move forward from here. They see the Confederates. The 1st Confederates are on a hill, quarter of a mile in that direction. The ridge, the small spur I showed you in that direction. This is all clear. So from this point, they begin to move forward, and the artillery. There is an artillery here. Sokalski's section, 2 guns, and they fire on the Confederates that are State Guardsmen, actually, State Guard cavalry that are over on that hill, that on their own initiative have come to investigate what's going on because of the report of the stragglers here. And that basically is the first time there's any combat in the Battle of Wilson's Creek. So these guys move forward. They push that Confederate or State Guard cavalry off that ridge. They go down into a valley and up to another hill, and they take up another defensive position on the next hill. And I think we'll see that on our very last stop.
We will.
Okay, so you're going.
We should be able to see that on the last stop, yeah.
Perfect. All right. Also, the Union establishes a field hospital here. Here, and then in a ravine kind of that we'll see at the last stop too, they establish field hospitals. Every battlefield you go to, they talk about, well, this was a field hospital. This was used as a field hospital. Well, any battle you go to, every house was used as a field hospital.
Yeah.
Because what, you can get 20 people in a house maybe? You got a couple thousand wounded people. I mean, places like this and Pea Ridge that are out in the middle of nowhere, they're just overwhelmed the locals with taking their food, taking their houses for medicine, draining their wells because of all the water they're taking out of them. They just decimate the civilian populations.
Like locusts.
Where there's, exactly, like locusts, or wherever you see a Civil War battle. So this is the start of the Battle of Wilson's Creek, basically right here. A gun from this spot fired the first shots in anger at Wilson's Creek. I didn't know, we've been with this group some, and I didn't know how many of you knew actually how to fire an artillery piece, and probably a lot don't. So did you see the artillery ammunition in the museum? It's fixed. You've got an artillery projectile, whether it's solid shot or case or canister, whatever, and that's attached to a powder bag. It's called fixed ammunition. And so you're not loading gunpowder and then you're not loading a shell. You just cram it in, load it. So you take that piece and you'll put it in the gun like this, not like this, like this. And then you'll take a ramrod, ramrod, and you'll push it down to the very end. So that powder bag goes to the very end. And if you look here on the end, there's a hole called the vent. And you take what's called a prick, which is basically looks like an ice pick, except with a little round piece on the end so it doesn't go all the way down. And you prick that bag, that canvas or whatever the bag's made out of. You prick the bag. And then somebody said, then you light it. No, you don't light it. That's ancient technology. You take a friction primer, a piece of brass about that long, maybe a little smaller than the average straw, filled with an explosive compound. It wasn't gunpowder. Was it something of nitrate?
Yeah.
Fulcrum of nitrate, something like that. You put it in there. It's got a handle. And then you take a lanyard, which is a long rope. It has a hook on the end of it and a handle. You attach that hook to a little handle here on the end, and then you bring it taut. Actually, you should be on the other side, but you get it taut. You don't jerk it. Slowly get it taut, and then you pull it, and that creates friction inside that primer. Shoots flame into that bag. Boom.
Out she goes.
And that's how you fire an artillery piece.
It's all based on a thing called flame front. So the faster the powder moved, the farther the gun would shoot. Remember, these are fixed bag shots, right? So you've got a 6-pound round or a 12-pounder, or you got a canister round that's mounted on the end of it. But on the back end, it's always got the same powder. So it's not like when we would knock off charges off the back end of the mortar rounds or put different bags into the back end of a howitzer, into the brass can, and then stick a primer up there and pull it. This thing has to be controlled. There's hardly any met data. You'd look at the sky and go, yep, we're going to aim shoot about that far, and they would turn this elevation and depression screw on the back end of the piece. And if you wanted to shoot farther, you'd screw it down. If you wanted to shoot closer, or you're going to shoot canister round, you wanted to pop up more. And it would all depend on how far they would set the fuse to go boom inside after the powder lit. The fuse would be set inside that would send everything out the other direction. For canister rounds, for the ball rounds, they just go up there and devastate everything they hit. If there was a charge round in the back end of it, it was lit automatically when the powder bag went off, so you would see these things go off. Sometimes they'd have a short fuse that would go out and go boom, and they would blow up in the sky, and everybody goes, oh, that's cool. That round went off too soon because it was supposed to go off closer to the ground, so the fragments would hit the troops on the ground. Also, the canister rounds, you took a look at the display in there, about that long, like a coffee can, full of 70 caliber balls or 58 caliber balls. It just made sense to make them that way because they had lots of them because they were making them for the rifles. So any kind of a 58 caliber ball, they just dump a bunch of them in there, pack it up in tight, and then put the powder bag on the back. When they fired it, those things were like a gigantic shotgun. Boom, and it would fly out and just destroy people on the ground. So you could defoliate almost an entire area with canister rounds if you knew what you were doing.
There were 4 types of ammunition: solid shot, which just like it sounds, it's a solid ball; spherical case. Shell, which was a hollow ball with explosive inside it. Spherical case was a solid ball with more balls inside, and then canister, which he's talking about. The first 3 are aimed to be shot at troops longer than 400 yards away. They're meant, the solid shot was meant to kind of bounce. The other 2 were meant, they had timers in them. There were holes in the balls. You had a wooden plug so big around, so long, and it had times on it, how long it took from the time that it left the gun till it exploded. So you cut your timer based on
distance and shot fired and how many people you wanted to smoke.
It's not an exact science, for sure. And then canister was used It ranges under 400 yards. This piece here, I think, has been altered. I think this is a 6-pounder gun, which was obsolete by the time of the Civil War, but you see hundreds of these on battlefields.
Looks like it's maybe
But you don't usually see these pieces rifled. This would have been produced before rifling, so this would have probably been retrofitted. Rifling didn't. This is brass. Or not brass. Yeah, brass. Rifling didn't do well in brass because it tended to wear out over time. Brass was much more effective. In a steel gun. Also, those first 3 rounds we talked about, the balls or bolts, depending on what you're firing, they're more effective fired out of a rifled gun. Canister, which was the most effective, was not very good out of a rifled gun because it kind of put a spin on the balls and made them inaccurate. One thing we forgot to talk about, this thing did have a sight. There would have been a little piece right here sticking up, and there's a little instrument looking something like that with a post that would have gone down in here. And so, you, like Kent was saying, you can sight the gun using the sight and then using this to raise it up and down.
Well, gee, Doug, what if you missed to the left? What would you do then?
Then you have a piece of wood about so long.
Yeah, don't do it.
It's not all of it, but it would go in there, stick in here, and one guy, even though how heavy this is, because of the way the weight is distributed, you can pick it up and just move it a little bit.
To transport these, would this be attached to a horse?
Not this piece, no. It would be attached to a limber chest. Yeah, which would be 2 wheels and a chest, not a caisson. A caisson is something different. A caisson is a much bigger, or 2 chests on its own wagon. It would be attached to a limber, and then they would be pulled together. This, Army guys, look at that. Does that look familiar? It's like almost the same thing we use today.
towing pintle.
Yeah.
Hook it up to a 5-ton or whatever.
Yeah, you could, I mean, I've seen them pulled behind vehicles before.
Or 105s are pulled behind Humvees.
Yeah.
Well, another question, Doug. You say they saw this battery, so I would presume a lot of this foliage was not here at the time.
This is a wood-burning society.
Yeah.
Plus, this is active farm ground. So it's either in fields or pastures, or it's been cut down for wood to burn or to make into buildings, barns.
So later on, in November, I'm going to talk about Perryville. And when I went to Perryville in the 90s, it looked like this. And they've since done a lot of work to restore the battlefield to its appearance during that time. Obviously, they haven't necessarily done that all the way here.
There was a site administrator here in the 90s that was into showing her ability to manage woodland. So,
well, she did a great job because there's a beautiful woodland behind us today.
It's all 30-year-old scrub. It's not anything nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is one of the places where you would really benefit from a better view. On the other side of the park, the views are more historic, but here it's kind of grown out. Kent, you got anything else to say?
Nope.